choose the keynote speaker. You may have seen her already, and we are going to jump right in. All the comments are coming in now. Yes, 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 yes. Here we go. We are going to get started. Halcyon has got a special guest. I'm going to drop off here and let her do her thing, and let's do this. This is going to be awesome. And thank you, all of you, for sticking in and having patience. Looking at the amount of people that are still alive, everyone has been chilling, waiting. So thank you all very much. So here we go.
Okay. Like Ricardo said, I am Halcyon Frank, dispatch lab, dispatcher, all that fun stuff. You saw me yesterday at technical difficulties, and I have today. They're following me. Please still invite me to your conferences. I won't break anything, I promise. But I am super excited to present this today, and I do have a special guest with me. We may look alike because we're still waiting for blood results to see if I'm adopted or not. But this is my sister, Deputy Bree Frank, and I will let her introduce herself a little bit for you guys.
Hi guys, I'm Deputy Frank. I work in Nebraska for an agency here in eastern Nebraska. We have our population of the county is about 40,000. So we serve about 643 square miles. I work for a sheriff's department here, and I'm excited to join Halcyon and what she has to say today and put in my opinion.
She's good at that. So we've done this before once together. Obviously, when I travel and do this, it's kind of hard to coordinate both of our schedules for her to come along just for a session. But we got to do it last fall, and it was really fun. And I think it adds a little bit to give not only the dispatch perspective, but while we're talking about it, that officer perspective, field responder. So we are going to jump in. It is building trust on both sides of the console. Trust is so important in the job we play, not only with our callers, but our first responders, coworkers, everyone. So hopefully this audio and video will work. Really quickly, we're just going to go through three main areas that lead to stronger trust, better relationships, understanding the considerations to make when working with our field responders, recognizing how our speech and attitude affects trust building, and what to avoid when we're trying to build that trust with them. So I'll go ahead and hit play. This is Simon Sinek. I'm a huge fan of him. If you haven't, any book you read by him is going to be fantastic. So I encourage you to check any one of those out.
I work with the Navy. I've worked with the Navy SEALs, and I asked them, like, how do you pick like the guys that go on SEAL Team 6, right? Right? Because they're the best. And they drew a graph for me. And on one side, they wrote the word performance, and on the other side, they wrote the word trust. The way they define the terms is performance on the battlefield and performance off the battlefield. So this is your skills. This is, did you make your quarterly earnings, however you want to translate it, right? Performance, traditional. This is, how are you off the battlefield? What kind of person are you? The way they put it is, I may trust you with my life, but do I trust you with my money and my wife? This is what they told me. Nobody wants this person, the low performer of low trust, of course. Of course, everybody wants this person, the high performer of high trust, of course. What they learned is that this person, the high performer of low trust, is a toxic leader and a toxic team member. And they would rather have a medium performer of high trust, sometimes even a low performer of high trust, it's a relative scale, over this person. This is the highest performing organization on the planet, and this person is more important than this person. And the problem in business is we have lopsided metrics. We have 1,000,001 metrics to measure someone's performance and negligible to no metrics to measure someone's trustworthiness. And so what we end up doing is promoting or bonusing toxicity in our businesses, which is bad for the long game because it eventually destroys the whole organization. The irony is it's unbelievably easy to find these people. Go to any team and say, who's the asshole? And they will all point to the same person. Equally, if you go to any team and say, who do you trust more than anybody else? Who's always got your back? And when the chips are down, they will be there with you. They will also all point to the same person. It's the best gifted natural leader who's creating an environment for everybody else to succeed, and they may not be your most individual highest performer. But that person, you better keep them on your team.
So like
I work with the Navy.
said, if I can get this there, I enjoy that video just because I think, to like someone said earlier, we kind of have transitioned to this QA world, right? And we're always looking at performance metrics and how we're doing and what we can measure and stuff. And so sometimes those skills like trust and trust building can kind of fall by the wayside because now we've shifted our focus onto the stuff that we can kind of measure. And I think that that's also true for the field side, I would say. You know, they're also looking, especially now in a social media journalism world, you know, they're trying to do what they can. So some of those other things take a back seat. So how this is split up is we're going to do the 3 C's. So we will dive into the first one. Let's see. There we go. So first one is consideration. And as it's pretty simple as we get into it. So first and foremost, we're all human. You know, we need to be considerate of each other. The golden rule, as most people learn in kindergarten, treat people how you want to be treated. Consider their feelings, their thoughts, opinions, just like you'd want them to, you know, consider yours. That's just the basic. Consider, you know, how they might handle something from their role and how that's different from what we do. People also respond differently based on their previous experience. So we always want to be cognizant and considerate of, you know, kind of where they're coming from. Sometimes you have these older officers who have been there, you know, for years, and they do something we're like, ugh, Jerry. Or, you know, we just kind of are like, I can't believe you did that. And then, you know, we get a little baby officer, new officer that does the same thing. And we're like, oh my gosh, they're so cute. That's so cute. You know, and we treat them different, even though, you know, they're doing the same job. They're doing the same thing. But we tend to separate them because of their experience. And there are things that they learn over time that, you know, plays into that. But just, you know, always consider, like, am I treating someone differently because they've been here, even though maybe that's not the greatest reason for me to be making that difference. Another thing is consider the history of your dispatch and your responders. Part of the reason I created this presentation was because I used to work for a large law enforcement agency that went through some consolidation. And it was really tough for a while because we had officers who we never saw. You know, they were so far away, but somehow through the phone and the radio, I have to convince them that I'm going to be there for them and get them back up, get them whatever they needed. So that's when I started to look at this stuff of how can we build that trust. So you may be new into an agency, but always kind of consider, like, what's the history here? You know, maybe they've overcome some consolidation and there's still kind of some lingering effects from that. You know, maybe at one point the relationship was really good and now it's kind of soured, or vice versa. So even if maybe you haven't been there to see some of that, always kind of consider what's been the history, what's kind of happened here, that things that are happening now or maybe causing frustration are just lingering effects of a history. I don't know if you want to build on that.
I'm going to go back to the baby officer issue here. I think that Halcyon makes a good point in the fact of everybody's kind of at a different portion in their law enforcement journey, or in their dispatch journey for that matter. So as you guys know, your baby officers, I think she's probably going to get in some trouble for that one, are going to be gung-ho, productive, proactive, and they're going to have a lot of radio traffic. They're going to be maybe a little bit overzealous. You're not going to be able to understand them all the time. They're going to mumble. They're going to scream at you on accident, I'm sure. But you have to remember that that's where they are in their journey. In the same way with the older guys that we love so much, they're have more time in their journey. So they don't yell at you as much. They don't mumble, some of them. And they also have more experience and can draw on that experience. As adult learners, we're always drawing on the experience that is previously past. So those new officers, they don't have anything to base it off of. So and you just consider where they're coming from. It might be helpful in knowing that they're not doing it technically on purpose, and reaching out to them and saying, like, hey, this whole shift, I haven't been able to hear you, or, you know, it's been really difficult. Is there something that I can do to help you? Or maybe you need to contact your radio development and see what's happening on their end. But it might be beneficial to reach out.
Yeah, which is all great points. I don't care. We call them baby officers. It'll be fine.
Great.
So going on to the next one then, consider your attitude and tone. Obviously, that kind of goes back to the goal, and we'll talk to them how you want to be talked to. Sometimes I've known, especially at my previous agency, to get a little sassy on the radio. And sometimes we can kind of do that, but there is a difference of, am I doing this to be disrespectful or rude? Or, sometimes we just know when we work with the same people over and over. So always take that into consideration, especially when you're working with somebody new, or maybe you go to a different shift. Just watch how you're talking might be received, even though, like I said, when you're on a shift with the same people and they know your style, know what you do, it may just be received differently. So always keep that in mind. Another big one, and I always keep notes because there's so many things that I think come into play with this topic. So I always want to make sure I'm hitting on all of them. Don't be afraid to explain the why. As we all know, we may be communications, but we don't communicate well. There's a lot of times where people on the road, they get an email from their chain of command and we get an email from our chain of command, and it's not always the same information first, or theirs came out last week and we didn't get ours till this week, or they never got anything and we got something. So, and then again, they're drawing on their experience. So always consider the why. And like, we'll get frustrated with people. I always give the story of, I had an officer who would do something and the first couple times I'm like, oh, why does he do it like this? And then I just took a moment and was like, hey, did you know if, you did it this way, it would be quicker? And he's just like, no one ever told me. So, always kind of be aware of the why. Why are they doing that way? It might just be because they were never told that. So that brings us into the second C, which is communication. Like I said, not our strong point. And going again, how are you speaking to others? How are you communicating? Are you being supportive and trying to help them out? Or are you just being short and rude and not, kind of fostering a teamwork mentality?
And that goes both ways, especially how people are speaking to each other on the radio, but over the phone as well. And I think that law enforcement can learn a couple things about being patient and it not always going your way, and vice versa. But there's always definitely times where you're going to be frustrated, but having an open line of communication is way easier for us if we feel like we can just dial in and be like, hey, what's happening? What's going on? Because this is not working. Than getting frustrated and just not saying anything and being rude to each other for the rest of shift. So I think that's good of how your tone says a lot.
For sure. And it also goes to, just communicating with them, get to know them. It's so easy, so easy to, not like somebody we don't know. If you think back in your head, especially maybe in like high school, middle school, was there somebody that you're like kind of heard about them and maybe they had a certain reputation and you're like, oh, I don't like them. And then you got to know them and you were like, oh, this person isn't that bad. Because once you got to know them, it was harder for you not to like them. But when you don't know them, it's super easy to be like, oh yeah, so-and-so, he always does his stuff wrong. He always does this or that. And then when you start to learn about them, it makes it a little more difficult because then you create that connection. And then that's when you're really starting to build that trust, when you reach out and communicate and get to know them. So utilize whatever opportunities you have. If you have agency meetings of some kind, anything like that, especially if you're an agency where they don't come into your center, always try to utilize those as ways, or, mutual aid meetings, anything like that as a way to connect with them. Just keep open communication. As it says, communicate frustrations, don't hold them in. All frustration does is build resentment. And then you've created this huge problem in your mind and they may not even know. They may not even know that you're mad with them. And then they walk in one day and this is bomb goes off and they're like, I didn't know. So definitely, always be willing to communicate those. One of my officers, I really enjoyed it because he would come in after pursuits and he'd be like, how's that for you on your end? This is what I noticed on my end. How did it go for you? Which even that simple question, allowed it a lot. It just became a casual thing. It wasn't like, ooh, I messed that up. He's going to be so mad. He just come in. How'd that go? And then he might bring up what he felt was maybe a shortcoming or whatnot, but it definitely took the fear and frustration out of having that conversation. Anything?
Yes, I agree. And I think that the more casual conversation that somebody can have is not that you shouldn't go through your chain of command and send emails and stuff when you have frustrations or you have safety issues or something like that. But sometimes it doesn't escalate to an email to a supervisor or something like that. Like maybe there's a way that you can chat with them right after and get both sides. Be open to hearing both sides. Don't tell them what they did wrong and nothing else. Get that feedback for yourself as well. But it might be a 5-minute conversation that doesn't have to be escalated to a supervisor, because then it always gets more people involved. And then now it sounds like we're complaining, but we're not really complaining. We're just trying to be better officers, better dispatchers, better people in general.
Yeah. And just going off of that, you always want to be aware, like there are going to be more serious issues where you really should, send the email, do the phone call, whatever it is, don't just kind of negate that. But if it is a thing where you can just call them up and say, hey, what happened there? Or, hey, did I miss something? Because we're on two sides, right? We can't see what they're doing. They can't see what we are doing. So it may just be that something happened on their side that we are not aware of. And so we sit there the whole time thinking like that they were mad or we did something wrong or something, when in reality, it had absolutely nothing to do with us. So, the main thing is like keep those open lines of communication. And just like she said, the more you can have those casual conversations when you're not in situations where maybe something happened or there were some frustrations, that's what's going to help you. And that's what's going to build that trust. I remember in my agency, when we first did the consolidation, I had an officer call up and he, it was like, well, I'm going home. And I was like, oh, it must be nice to go home, just giving him a hard time. And I remember later he was like, that was the first time I called up there and somebody like had some personality. So don't be afraid to like try to connect and communicate to connect with them. Because again, we are all human. So we like to laugh. We like to joke, that makes it easier. One thing both the agencies I worked at have is like a messaging system. So, hey, shoot them a message and tell them to have a good day. Some of them might be like, that was weird, but it's not going to hurt anything. Just find those little ways. It kind of goes back to, the being an encourager. That may be the communication route you choose, just to encourage them in simple ways, even if you don't maybe have the opportunity to have whole conversations with them. So along with that too, going back just a little bit, make sure you do though match the medium to the message. So if it is something serious and it needs to be an email to the supervisor, go that way. Certain situations, especially if you are like upset or frustrated, don't message them some really like long message with 7 exclamation marks, right? Because we all knows what happens when we text something angry. It does not come across the way we intended it. And on the reverse, we might text something that we don't think is, sounds angry or anything, and somebody interprets it differently. So when you are building those bridges, make sure you match your medium to the message. And you're not, sending a message when maybe it should be a phone call, or, if it's something significant, like, and maybe it should be in person if you have that opportunity. And the last thing, communication. I think this goes for dispatch, whether you're building relationships or just learning the job. One of the things that's helped me be most successful is if you have a question, ask it. I know sometimes, especially when you're new, new people get a bad rap because you ask a lot of questions, but I will tell people like, I'm a question asker. Like if I have a question, I'm going to ask you. I walked into the office of a lieutenant one time and he was like, well, since you're here and you're inquisitive. And I was like, well, I'm always here and I'm always inquisitive. So, I need an answer. But don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask your officers, firefighters, paramedics. And because by you showing that interest, you're building trust, because now they're like, oh, well, she wants to know what our job is. So she's interested in learning. She wants to improve her skills by having more of a big picture. So that's also a really simple way. If you have a question, just go ahead and ask it and find out how their stuff works. Sometimes knowing that big picture can be really helpful to help us do better at our job. So
I
anything
also
else
think too, just to piggyback on that, when you have questions or to build, like, so right now we're not able to go into our dispatch center. And personal reasons aside, I think that that's definitely harder to build those relationships, right? Like when you can go into your dispatch center and see them and see how they're doing and ask about their family, like that always helps in building that trust. So when you're not able to go into the center, you kind of have to come up with ways that are a little bit different. Like she said, whether that's shooting somebody an email or a text message or something like that. When you're using those work platforms, it's always definitely needs to be work appropriate. But telling someone to have a good day or to be safe is worth your time. It's worth your weight in gold, because they're going to know that at the end of the day, if they're getting shot at, you're going to have their back and you're going to tell other people where to find them. And I also think too, like if you really care about the safety of your officers, which I know everybody does, is to understand how they work and how their radio works. In our agency, we call out traffic stops, and we have all of our radio traffic done prior to making contact with that vehicle. So after our radio traffic, if you didn't get that and you asked to repeat, we're probably not going to have enough time to repeat that for you, because we're already making contact with that violator vehicle, and it's an unknown risk traffic stop. So we're not going to be on our radios while we're doing that. So not getting frustrated with us not answering and asking for 27 status checks is going to be a lot better. And you'll know, okay, they've called it out. I have the location, but I don't have the plate. When they are done with that contact, I'm going to ask them for the plate again. Now, if it's a reoccurring problem and you're never getting the plate because maybe the officer's mumbling or they're staticky on the radio, then that's something to address completely different. But if it's just a kind of a one-time thing and you missed it because they cut themselves off or whatever, knowing to give them a little bit of time. So that's the difference she was talking about. Like if you are knowing what they're doing on their end and they're knowing what you're doing on your end. So that way you have a little bit of leniency for each other.
Yeah, just like Kara said, ride-alongs are huge. That's something I was taught, when you just going off of her example, like traffic stop, if, you didn't quite get that and they don't answer you, it's now because they're talking. So just little stuff like that can make a huge difference, because once that was communicated to me, once I learned that, I wasn't getting offended anymore, because it wasn't like, oh, he's not telling me. It was like, okay, he's talking. Let me give him a few minutes, and then he'll get back to me. So it definitely changes your outlook and how you kind of approach things. One thing, especially when it comes to communication, I have to say, if you are married to someone on the other side of the radio, or you have a sibling or something, it's really nice. And I hope you're able to take advantage of it to be able to kind of talk things out with them. The sit-alongs too are also good ideas for the field to come in. But, I'll come home and I'll be like, this is what they did. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And she'll be like, okay, well, but if they were doing this, and then I'm like, fine. But
which happens all the time.
Not all the time, but it does happen. But it goes both ways too. She'll come in and say, well, dispatch did this, or, maybe not angry, but just curious. And I'm like, okay, well, if their procedure maybe looks like this, and that's why they did that. And so, and because we're sisters, as our mom says, we have to love each other, even if we don't like each other. So, we're kind of able to be more brutally honest than maybe in a work relationship. So if you do have someone like that you can communicate and just be a little more open and honest and learning this stuff, that's also a great way to do it. Still being respectful and stuff, but it definitely adds a different perspective and way to learn as well.
And I'll add to the sit-alongs. So in our agency, our FTO programs, our field training officers have an entire shift with dispatch. Does that always get done? No, sometimes they only get a couple hours, just the way things are. But I think that's crazy, immensely important for them to get in there to see, well, why do you run the name before the date of birth? Well, because that's how we need to put it into the system. So everything has its place and everything's done like it's done for a reason, but we might not always know that. So somebody coming in looking from the outside, they might run somebody with their date of birth first, their name, and then their race and gender completely out of order. Well, it takes more time for you guys to put it in, to run through NCIC or whatever you're running through. So it takes more time, and it takes away, and then you have more time on your traffic stops. So just knowing those short little things that help out is definitely a bonus, and that's why we try as an agency to put our new guys into dispatch and to do sit-alongs, which I think is a great idea. And our dispatch center does do ride-alongs as well. Their first phase of their ride-alongs is maps. So we try to get them out to most of the county, especially if people aren't familiar with the smaller towns that they're covering, because we do have a pretty big county. So we're trying to show them, because you always know if you can see it in person, then you can connect it back when people are talking. So sit-alongs and ride-alongs are a great idea.
Yeah, and just, again, just a suggestion, if you're looking for ways to build trust, learning your area is huge. Like I said, it was an agency, we go through huge consolidation, and we took over a lot more area. And it truly made a difference when I was able to tell those officers, oh yeah, I know where that is. Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Oh yeah, I went up there. Because it was just that little step, that showed them, hey, I'm engaged, I'm interested, I want to do this job well. And that really helped build trust and kind of bridge the gap with them. So the last C, consideration. Consistency. I get my C's confused. I would venture to say that this is going to be this is possibly the most important one. This is going to be one that you really want to make sure that you're working on and demonstrating, because just in general, no one likes someone life who's unreliable, right? We don't like having friends who flake out on plans. We don't like having people we can't depend on. So this is so very important that we are consistent and dependable. And really the bottom line for this is, can they depend on you? When you're going to work every day and you're doing what you need to do, are they, can they depend on you? When they call on the radio, are you answering it? When you're calling on the phone and answering those calls, are you getting the information that they're going to need to respond? So it's just a huge thing, and it just builds the trust that much almost quicker if they know that even if you make a mistake or you trip up somewhere, that's not the normal you. I believe it's on the next one. So it's the difference between you're a dispatcher who's having a bad day and you're a bad dispatcher. Like I said, an officer that would come in and, I'd make a mistake, or maybe a pursuit didn't go as well, and he'd be like, oh, you're not really on your A game today. I'd be like, no, I'm not. You didn't have to point it out to me though. But he's saying it with the best, and, with the intentions that, hey, that wasn't your best thing, but he knows, the level that I perform at. So it really is going to change their mentality of, oh, so-and-so is just having a bad day. Because I feel like, there's a lot of situations where we might be, say that about the field. Maybe their radio traffic is off that day, or they don't sound as perky, or, whatever it might be. And we may be, observing them like, I don't think they're having the greatest day. So it also can really go both ways. I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Leslie, just saw your comment as well. In the dispatch center, there's definitely, and obviously in the sheriff's office, or whatever law enforcement agency you're in, you have those like, oh, I don't want to work with this person. And it goes both ways. There's cops that I'm like, get off the radio. Your dissertation is ridiculous. I don't have time for you. So it goes both ways for sure. But those off comments where you definitely know a little bit more or something about somebody else, like let them make their own opinions of that person. So maybe keep your comments to a minimum, and vice versa too in law enforcement agencies. I don't want to seem one-sided by that by any means, but just so that if somebody's in the dispatch center and you're having problems with a coworker, the small comments that you say, people pick up on those. So just make sure that you're wait till they leave and tell them directly to that person when they leave. So then that way you kind of look more professional as well. And I wholeheartedly believe that in the line of business right now, dispatch does not get the recognition that they deserve. I actually had a dispatcher the other day text me and goes, I am so sorry for that pursuit. That call is going to be so messed up. And I texted her, I was like, no problem. That was a cluster. I understand. And all that simple text message. So when I was done and I was reading the call and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so messed up. What were they doing in there? I already knew that it was already a cluster. She already had other things going on. So then it just kind of takes that frustration away a little bit, because they already know that something's off. It's not the same. It's a bad day versus a bad dispatcher. So we definitely know on that sense, and just that small text message might help you as well.
And yeah, and going back to Leslie's thing, I think that's a huge point too, whether it's your field responders, whether it's other agencies, really watch how you're speaking about people, because just like she said, it may be someone you've never met, but you've heard all of these opinions and you've started to form one, and then you may meet them and you're like, I don't see a problem here, because we're all different personalities. So some people click, some people don't. So definitely watch how you're talking about people, what you're saying, kind of letting new people just form their own opinions. And especially if there's something that you think is frustrating, you're always, they do this wrong and they do this wrong and they do this wrong. And then that new person, the first time they do it, they're automatically getting frustrated. They've never even had that problem before. And they're already frustrated because they've listened to other people in the center. And it really does go back. If you permit it, you promote it. Bad attitudes, definitely will infect everyone. It's kind of getting off topic a little bit, but I love it that it's like when you put a piece of bad fruit in a basket, it makes all the rest of the fruit bad. So if you're the bad fruit in the basket and you're making those comments, and people don't depend on you, they know because they know you're consistently making those comments, which is the wrong type of consistency that we're aiming for. It's the same with the fruit. Then it all goes bad. And there's a hashtag with this, like, get out of my fruit basket, Karen. You don't want to be the bad fruit that's infecting everybody else. You want to be the one that's dependable and consistently there for them. We all get frustrated. We're going to make those comments, but just make sure that the consistency that you fall under is not that you're consistently doing those types of things. So definitely working to be dependable. And again, just you want to be that dispatcher who's maybe having a bad day and not the dispatcher who is a bad dispatcher. And the basic is, everyone values consistency. Everyone, should be showing up every day to do their best work. Because at the end of the day, we all should be proud of the work that we do. And so everybody should be wanting to show up and do that and be the ones that they can depend on. Trying to think if there's anything else.
I don't know. I also think that when you have those relationships built, and law enforcement is guilty of this just as well. I feel like I'm one-sided. I'm sorry, guys, but law enforcement's obviously better. No, I'm just kidding. But if you have those bridges built, it takes a lot to break those bridges down. So one bad day is not going to break those bridges down, because you already have that trust. You already can be able to talk to somebody and all that. So those bridges are there. So one bad day is not going to ruin it, but you have to build those bridges first before they come. So, and unfortunately, it starts at the top. It starts with the administration. It starts with making those good relationships between agencies, especially for agencies that are definitely different. Like, so.
Sorry, Roxy.
Sorry.
She's a little biased.
I know. So if our agency is dispatched by an outside agency, it's not connected to the sheriff's office. They dispatch for the sheriff's office and the police department. So it's not actually within the sheriff's office like we used to have. So it used to be sheriff's office employees. So that's different. So that their admin also needs to get along with our admin, so that it can trickle down and those bridges can be made. So and if it doesn't happen from the administrative level, then it's up to you to make those bridges and to make sure that you can talk to your officers, because at the end of the day, you're sending their backup. if something happens and they're getting the crap beat out of them, they depend on you more than they will ever tell you in their entire lives. And they can say they can do it on their own, and they can say they can self-dispatch, but they're lying. They cannot. So just know.
If any officers are watching this, you can send your angry letters to her, not me.
But I'm just saying, they know. We don't want to admit it. I don't want to admit it, but they know that we need them, and we know at the end of the day that they're going to send us help.
Yeah, and before we move on to kind of the flip side of this, I think that's just it too. Sometimes, again, going back, leadership doesn't do something, admin doesn't do something, but that's really what it is. We're on the front line, guys. We are the ones sending their backup. They're the ones giving us information we need. So no matter what people at the top are doing, to a certain extent, it's up to us. It's up to us to create those relationships. It's I can't talk anymore. It's up to us to show that we're dependable, that we're showing up every day, and we're there to help them work. One of the biggest things in my career that I will never forget, and kind of goes to show how I'm no expert. I am not, the authority on this by any means. But I had an officer that was sitting on the side of the road doing reports, and he was rear-ended by a guy going 70 miles per hour. When he was struck, it caused his radio to be, destroyed. Basically, his car radio, all he had was his portable. And, he was able, he had some issues with his arm and he couldn't quite get, so he went on a channel of another agency that we actually monitored. So I was able to hear him call in for help. So I sent, the help, and he is back at work and everything's okay. But I remember when I went into the hospital to see him the next day, he said something to the effect of, I knew if I could just get on the radio and if I could just get to Halcyon, that I would get help. She would send backup. And I tell that not because of what I've done, but I encourage you to kind of put yourself in that position and kind of ask yourself, am I the type of dispatcher that when I go to work every day, my people know if something happens that I'm going to do everything in my power to get them the help that they need? So I kind of challenge you to just reflect and see if that's something that you're like, I don't know, or maybe that's an area that I work on, or maybe you're like, yep, I have a great relationship. They know I'm there for them. Then that's awesome. So it's kind of my challenge to you, put yourself in that situation and kind of see what you think, would happen. Next, we're kind of going to look at the other side of it. So on the flip side, keep professional boundaries. This one, it's great to be friends with people, and you can totally be friends with people in the field. You can be related to them. But we always want to keep those professional boundaries, especially when we're at work. If you have an issue with somebody on the outside, make sure when you're coming to work that no one can tell, you're keeping it professional. And, not blurring those lines. Like she kind of mentioned, when you're messaging and stuff, make sure that your messages are within those professional boundaries and all that kind of stuff. Another one I think is big is avoid showing favoritism. So we really want to watch, because when you do show favoritism, it can actually hurt the trust you've built with other field responders. If they see that you're always favoring this person over them, it may make them feel like, hey, I don't know that they necessarily care for me, so I'm not sure if I can depend on them because they obviously like so-and-so better. So you want to try and make sure that it's not something that you're doing. I know sometimes it's a struggle. Like I said, we're all human, different personalities click with other personalities, but always kind of watching that and making sure you're not, showing that favoritism. And recognizing that not all people will be receptive. And trust does not equal friendship. So you may work really hard to build trust with people, and it may just seem like they do not care and they are not receptive and they don't want anything to do with it. I'm speaking from experience, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't try. And it doesn't equal friendship. I had that there was an officer who I was 100% sure that he did not like me. I don't think he liked anybody. One wasn't on my list of favorites. I wasn't on his list of favorites. But before I left the agency, the rumor mill's going that I might be leaving, and I am talking to him, and he says, yeah, I heard you're leaving. And I was like, no, I'm not going anywhere yet. And he's like, okay, well, I really wish you wouldn't. And I was like, is he talking to me? Like, I know he's not talking to me. Like, I don't think this guy even likes me. And I don't think he did necessarily, but he trusted me. He trusted me that I was doing what I could when I was on the radio, and I was trying to do well by the officers in the field, and that I was dependable. So, you may not always get along, may not always be the ones that you joke with, but it does not mean either, though, that you're not building trust with them. So make sure that, that those are two different things. And they're not getting kind of caught up in that kind of thing, trying to, well, I don't think he likes me. Let's see if I can do it to make them like me or something like that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I agree with the favoritism thing. And it goes every time. It goes both ways. There was a while there that we would call in and we would ask for a specific person, because I know if I call in and ask for a specific dispatcher, they're going to do what I'd like, and they're going to do it quickly, and they know what they're doing. But that wasn't really fair to the new people that I was avoiding, because those new people are just new. They maybe didn't know how to do it as quickly, but they still were learning and knew how to do it. So not that I really learned too much, but I tried to not jump over people and ask different people to do things. Like, whoever you get on the phone is generally who you talk to. So that was definitely a learning curve for me. Like, if I'm skipping the new people, then they're never going to have that trust with me to say, oh, well, I can run that just as fast as somebody else, but they always skip over me. So I think that's good too. Like, give those new people a chance, because they might be just as good as everyone else you're working with. They're just new and they haven't learned everything yet.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. And just to end on, encourage your field responders to, especially in those situations, to reach out to new people. The one dispatch I was in, we were in a line, and so they would walk all the way across the room to bring me something, and I'm like, you just passed two people who could do this too, and they were newer. I'm like, take it back to them. They need the experience, they need to learn. And just like she said, when you're skipping over people, that's not helping build trust with anybody, but then you're also helping yourself build trust with your coworkers. Because they see that you're not just like, okay, well, I'll just do it all, because they don't know what they're doing. You've now built trust with them, and then between them and the officer, because the officer or whoever is going to see that they're able to do it, and then they know that you're there to support them and that you're trying to help them learn as well. So that is that. I believe I have a couple more slides. So what does this look like for your center? Just take, a minute. I encourage you, what does consideration look like? Are there ways that you can demonstrate more consideration? Explaining things, making sure people understand how things work. You've been told the same information, which also can fall under communication. What steps can you take to improve it in your center? And then consistency. What can you do to show people they can depend on you? And these are all definitely things that start with you, and, can have a ripple effect and influence others, just as, kind of talked about multiple times over these past couple of days. So again, I just encourage you to kind of think about those. What does this look like for you and your center? And then I have one other quick video.
In today's global marketplace, speed is everything. And in my experience, one thing creates speed more effectively than anything else. That one thing is trust. It's the hidden variable that changes everything. One time I hired a guide to take me fly fishing. While we were fishing, he asked me, "What do you see?" "I see a beautiful river." "Do you see any fish?" "No." Then he told me to put on a pair of polarized sunglasses. Suddenly, everything looked dramatically different. I could see through the water, and I could see fish, a lot of fish. Suddenly, I saw enormous possibilities that I had not seen before. The fish were there all along, but until I put on the glasses, they speed of trust works the same way. More than any other factor, it can reduce costs, increase productivity, enhance innovation, improve collaboration, and increase value. It's there, but it's beneath the surface. And unless we have eyes to see it, it will stay hidden.
So does that. And just like he says, it's there. The trust is there. We just have to be willing to put in the work to build it. So for those of you who feel like, you don't or you don't have a chance, just keep working at it. About the time you quit may be the time that people are starting to come around. So, always work at it. The speed of your agency grows, or efficiency of your agency grows at the speed of trust. So trust can be a huge builder. Kind of go back to where we started. We focused on QA and our performance metrics and stuff. It ties in there. When you have trust and you've built it, you may truly find that your performance is doing that much better because, you're distracted by frustrations or issues or anything like that. So it's out there. You guys can get it. Hopefully, this is kind of giving you some ideas of better ways to build it. Thank you for sticking with us through all the technical difficulties.
Thanks, guys.
I'm rushing through it. Ricardo's back. I don't know if there's any questions.
Some of the questions that were in here were actually just questions asking where we were. So I think that one of the best things about your session and all, the fact that you could see the comments, the both of you, I think that's what really helped drive this discussion where, that's why there wasn't any questions in there, at least from the way I was viewing it through here, is because there was so many things that were coming up in the comments, and then the both of you are answering and going back and forth. That's what makes this such a good way to do this, where everyone, so let me put it this way, and I know we're kind of eating into Tony's session here that's going to start here pretty soon, but I already talked to him, so we're good there. But and we've been there, a lot of us, when we're teaching and doing these sessions, a lot of people, they don't always respond. Like sometimes someone might feel like, well, I don't want to be wrong, or I don't want to say the wrong or the wrong answer or something like that. Through this, everyone is answering, they don't feel like they're on the spot. And I think that's what helps really with this, to get all that information. So thank you both for doing this. And I guess just a little bit of input from the both of you on how this went between yourselves, as well as the comments, and how everything was working with the flow of your presentation.
Yeah, I was glad compared to yesterday. It was much better, even though it's hard. But it is. And I really do appreciate everybody commenting and, putting in their stuff, because it does make it feel like more of, almost that live. And I saw somebody earlier make a comment about they liked it because they could discuss while we're speaking, which I also think is great, because how many times are we in a session and we're trying to be like, you're not trying to be rude. You just really want to tell maybe your coworker or something that you found, interesting. No, Becky, I'm not hugging you.
See, exactly, like that right there.
Yeah.
The reactions that are coming up. So how about your sister? How's your sister? How are you with hugs?
No, I think this is a great platform. And I think it went really well because, no, Becky, I don't like that either. I think it went really well because to be able to have that discussion continue and keep going, because we can read the comments and talk on it real quick, and answer those questions versus answering all the questions at the end, which sometimes you have to do it on live demonstration. So yeah. I think it was really great, and I really like this platform. It works really well.
Awesome. Well, thank you again both very much. I think as we continue going through this the rest of today and then into the last day of Dare to Be Great 2020, we're seeing some of the future of how some of this will be done, or can be done. I mean,
yeah. I have to make a note really quick. That is our mother in the comments saying that she makes us give her hugs.
Don't believe anything she says.
That's pretty awesome. Well, again, thank you both for being on. It was an honor having you here. And everyone in the in the comments and everything watching, we're going to switch over to the next session. We have Tony Harrison. He's going to start at about 4 p.m. Eastern time. It might be a couple of minutes afterwards. We got to set everything up in the green room. But his session is going to be lessons learned from the Oklahoma City bombing. And last week on the, I believe it was the 19th, was the 25th anniversary. So it's quite a story. And he was there when this happened. And I will see you there. I'm going to jump off here and bring you over. And again, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Yes.